Thank you for joining today's webcast, What You Need to Know About EMS Telemedicine. I'm Nancy Perry, Editorial Director for EMSworld.com and EMS World Magazine. This webinar will discuss one of the most controversial topics in EMS today, the use of telemedicine in ambulances. We will cover the technology, how to approach the concept, reasons for and against it, what to consider in implementation, and much more. Before we begin, I would like to thank the sponsor of this webcast, General Devices. General Devices has been a leader in EMS communications, documentation, information management, and telemedicine for the past 20 years. The company features configurable, fully integrated multifunction systems used for STEMI, day-to-day EMS, and EMS telemedicine. The company's history in telemedicine goes back to 1985, when it did pioneering work in remotely assessing and defibrillating patients. It has continued to pursue the technology ever since. The more than 800 users of General Devices equipment range from small community hospitals to large organizations such as New York City Fire and EMS. It is now my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Kurt Bashford, President of General Devices. A former EMT, Kurt holds a BS in Electrical Engineering and a Master's in Biomedical Engineering. His experience at General Devices spans 25 years and includes the design of many devices used in EMS for sending, receiving, and managing information, FDA regulatory, and managing the design and installation of equipment for organizations such as FDNY, Nassau County EMS, Tucson's ER-Link, and Baton Rouge's BR Med Connect. A frequent conference presenter and discussion panel participant, Kurt was a member of the DOC-NTIA Joint Advisory Committee on Communications Capabilities of Emergency Medical and Public Healthcare Facilities. During the presentation, please feel free to submit questions for Kurt using the question submission section located at the bottom of your screen. You can also send comments and suggestions. At the end of the webcast, we will try to answer as many of your questions as we can. Without further delay, it's my great pleasure to welcome Kurt Bashford.
Thank you, Nancy. There's certainly a lot of information to go over in a limited amount of time. Much of what I'm going to present is also in the companion articles online at the EMSworld.com website and on the General Devices website. So please excuse me in advance if I go fast or skip over some of the items. So let's get right to it. Since today's topic of EMS telemedicine includes the use of video, I'm going to open up with a clip from Dr. Ray Fowler. Many of you are aware that Dr. Fowler is known nationally as a leader in EMS, but he's also one of the founding fathers of EMS telemedicine.
Hello, I'm Ray Fowler. I'm an emergency physician out of Dallas, Texas, where I work at the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center. I'm so pleased to be here today, and I want to thank Kurt for inviting me. The important thing now is to realize that this is the most important era in the history of emergency medical services. We are now a subspecialty of medicine since last year, and in so many of our important areas, such as cardiopulmonary resuscitation, we have learned more in the last few years than in the entire time in the history of the craft. It's so important now that we grab the advantage that is given to us by telecommunication, by telemedicine. EMS telemedicine has the promise of opening the door to many opportunities that will broaden the assessment, the diagnostic and management capabilities of the pre-hospital providers, and give us opportunities that we have never had before, and we must seize this moment. My message to you is a plea for open architecture, that we can find a way that those entities that can be linked, that can transfer the necessary diagnostic and assessment information to the entities that need it to oversee the overall care of a patient. We need to seize the moment and make this happen. For example, recruiting a distant physician specialist to enhance a paramedic's ability to employ increasingly advanced diagnostic analyses, from complex electrocardiographic interpretation to perhaps parsing through difficult patient medical scenarios. This can only result in a higher level of professionalism and improved patient care. This is the greatest era in the history of emergency medical services, and I am looking forward to seeing EMS across this new frontier. Thank you.
Well, that was certainly a powerful message, and thanks to Dr. Fowler for that. So let's begin with some overview. First, we're going to talk about what the actual what and why of EMS telemedicine is. So what is telemedicine? Well, there are many similar definitions of telemedicine out there in cyberspace, and the one here is from the American Telemedicine Association. It's quite generic and open, and then if you think about what the application is so what's different with EMS telemedicine, the difference is the mobile application, meaning that this telemedicine is done in the wireless environment. So what's new? What's new about doing telemedicine for EMS? Well, by definition, isn't telemedicine what EMS has always done? And yes, the answer is yes, of course. Online medical oversight, sending of EKGs and voice, that's been done for the last 35 years. We just didn't call it telemedicine. And mobile telemedicine, while subtle difference in definition, equates to big differences in capabilities and implementation. And this is disruptive technology, potentially disrupting the traditional way that EMS practices. And what does the future hold, or what does it potentially hold for us? Well, we're going to learn the good and the bad, the reasons for, the reasons against. But ultimately, like Dr. Fowler said, we believe the future of EMS and EMS telemedicine are in fact linked. So, of course, there are motives for exploring EMS telemedicine, and some of these potential opportunities include the promise of improved patient care, accuracy of information, advances in professionalism. There's a community health tie-in as well as a community paramedicine tie-in, and potentially cost savings as well. And moving on to some possible applications. So what could we possibly use EMS telemedicine for? Well, there's a phrase that I like that Dr. Pepe coined back at the Eagles presentation way back in 2005, and I still think it's appropriate here. Certainly if a picture's worth 1,000 words, and a video must be worth 1,000,000. So thinking about applications and what some possible applications are. The first one, recorded refusal. This is kind of one of the no-brainer applications. This is a use that helps cover one of the risky gray areas of the practice of EMS in the field. And even those that we've spoken to that are skeptical or negative on the use of EMS telemedicine, perhaps, they understand the need here. With direct oversight between a physician or specialist with the patient, the availability of documenting the assessment of the risk and advising of the patient of what the risks are and the decline in the care. Certainly there's some promise there. The next application we'll talk about kind of another no-brainer in that there's a lot of activity in this area. We know the stroke is the next frontier after STEMI care, and there's many parallels to the aspects of both of these. As far as assessments go, currently many are doing just a Cincinnati score in the field, and there's a lot of neurologists that believe better assessments can be done in the field. Similar to STEMI, a timely transport to an interventional center is key. Time is brain in this case. And there's actually been a lot of work in the area of telestroke care. And we've actually been working with one of the leading neurologists in that effort, Dr. Levine and his group out of New York City. So let's get some commentary from him with a video clip.
The single most important factor in improving patients' outcomes from acute ischemic stroke is time to treatment. By using more sophisticated, newer technologies in the pre-hospital arena, including video telecommunications or telemedicine, the technology is now available to more rapidly assess patients with acute stroke, have the ER, eyes and ears, be able to communicate with pre-hospital providers, and make decisions about getting patients quicker to stroke centers, comprehensive stroke centers, and getting treatment on board for patients more appropriately. So it is the belief of many of us in the field that pre-hospital video telecommunications will become more and more important in helping to triage and care for patients with acute ischemic
We
stroke.
thank Dr. Levine for his comments, and we're looking forward to working with his group on an upcoming study. Continuing on with possible applications, another is treat and release. Certainly the wind is beginning to blow stronger on this topic, and there are obvious goals, and the belief that EMS telemedicine will be a good tool in this area as well. In the next video clip, Dr. Aber is going to present an example scenario for the use of EMS telemedicine to reduce unnecessary hospital visits. Dr. Aber is one of the founding fathers of telemedicine in Baton Rouge.
The mom calls EMS, who arrives promptly on the scene. The patient is evaluated by the medic, who feels the need to transport is questionable. A remote ED physician is brought to the scene by telemedicine. He assesses the vital signs and observes the patient during and after appropriate therapy. The physician and the mom then speak with one another. He determines that she is competent to provide the needed therapy, and they agree to follow the patient's response by phone. The medic reviews the treatment plan with the mom, and the decision is made not to transport. Audio, video, and data is captured for medical legal purposes.
And again, thanks to Dr. Aber for sharing his views. So another possible application, trauma and burn assessment, and there's certainly parallels here, and all these possible applications certainly have some parallels. One aspect is improving the decision-making in go-no-go and fly-no-fly decisions. And we all know depending on your locale, the potential distance that may have to be traveled or the potential costs associated with a helicopter flight. Appropriate transport to a specialty center ties in with these as well. And perhaps improving outcomes and decreasing length of stay in the hospital. And we've spoken to some professionals about these concepts and about trauma and burn assessment. And those above are some of the points raised. About Randy Kearns out of the University of North Carolina raised some of these about burns. And you can see, again, the common threads they have to other applications. Disaster response is another big one, and certainly is a topic of recent events. According to Dr. Roy Olson, the head of the section on pre-hospital and disaster medicine at Wake Forest University School of Medicine, has offered some of these thoughts, making the knowledge of the special available to the provider in the field, he sees as a benefit put forth by EMS telemedicine, and also that it could act as a force multiplier. Certainly those in the field have limited resources and limited transport services, and believes this could be a full force multiplier tool for that. We're going to talk a little bit of technology. I'm not going to go too deep. Certainly there's a lot of buzzwords and technical details that we won't get into for this webcast, but we'll touch on a few just to bring everybody up to some of the common terminology. And why are we even talking about some of these technologies today? Well, there's actually a convergence of technology that's out there now. We can think of smaller and faster computers, more powerful mobile devices. Think of what we wear either on our belt or in our pocket, the power of phones and pads and small computers have these days. And coupling that all together with higher bandwidth wireless communications. Wi-Fi is common, with 3G and 4G coming in place now. All these pieces of technology are really coming together and are what's making useful EMS telemedicine possible. A little bit on the technology. When we talk wireless communications, we're really talking about bandwidth and data rates, speed. How much can we push through? How fast can we upload? How fast can we download? And that really depends on the connection. So in simple terms, it's often referred to as a broadband connection as a pipe, and pipes come in different sizes. So if we look at some of the examples here, the first ones really are the different levels of cellular technology going back from the 1X all the way up to the 4G days. And you can see there's been, tenfold, leaps in speeds. Also of notice is the fact that in the 3G and the 4G, they're not symmetrical. The upload speeds and the download speeds are different. And if you think about that for a second, this is kind of one of the hurdles, is that from the ambulance going back to the hospital where you want to send all that information from the field, you're really doing the upload. So you're on the challenging side, if you would, on these data connections. And then also, if you look at the last item there, that's the local area network, or the hardwired LAN within, say, a hospital or a comm center. Certainly that's the upper end of where things can go today. But even if you look at 4G, which we all know is pretty darn fast, there's still a big disparity between what can be done in a wireless environment and what can be done in a wired. And this is a key point back to what I mentioned earlier, in that there is a big difference between traditional interfacility telemedicine and telemedicine in a mobile wireless environment. And what you can do in one does not mean that you're going to be able to do that on the other. And talk a little bit about audio, video. Certainly our goal is we want to have video and data and voice all concurrent. Again, in our wired environment from our PCs, we can do some of these things, but take that out into the mobile environment, that's certainly more challenging. As an example here on some of the topics, such as resolution, we all think, or most of us think, when somebody mentions a video, that we're trained to think HD quality now. Are you going to get that in a moving ambulance? Probably not at this stage, but is it coming as things improve? More than likely. Frame rates, we don't normally think in terms of frame rates, because TV is always fast enough that we don't see motion breakup, 30 frames a second. Are you going to be able to get that speed and that quality live in the ambulance? Again, probably not at this stage of the game. And there's different standards out there, different video standards and call setup. We won't go into details, but just be aware of them. And then some other factors. We talked about pipes, and that's the easy one. We can visualize a big pipe. You can push more data through. But it's not just how big the pipe is. It's also how fast, how consistent the data goes through. Is there jitter? Is there latency? And they're technical terms, but they do all relate to what the quality and what you can do at the other end is. Just an example, say for live streaming telemedicine with, say, moderate performance, to do video and voice live, we would need a pipe that can consistently do about 250 kilobits per second. And if you think back, if you recall the previous slide, you notice that this example is really pushing the limits of 3G, considering we have to use the upload side of that. So unless you're using store and forward technique for live streaming video, you'd probably want to use the conventional means for the voice. The human brain can deal with hiccups in video. If we see that blockiness, we see it on TV, it continues on and we just deal with it. But you can't deal with that typically in a voice conversation. It could mean the difference between hearing 1 and 100 milligrams of a drug. Okay, so on our next topic, we're going to talk about what is needed. And this slide's a little bit busy, and I apologize for that. I just wanted to give you kind of a high-level overview, and it's intuitive, but just to go over. The items on the left side are more what we're doing from the field. Devices for presenting images from the field, whether it be cameras or information out of monitors or data out of monitors. All of those that information needs to go through some form of broadband communications. And it's going to end up at some call center somewhere. Now, that call center may be an emergency department in a hospital. It may be on a telemedicine area, perhaps in a hospital, but it may be a separate remote call center, which may be the way some of these things tend to go. On the equipment side, what is needed? Well, the answer to the question really depends on your application, but it also depends on a number of other factors. It's going to depend on your budget. It's going to depend on the communications length that we just talked about. It's going to depend on the expertise of the people that you have available to you to help set up these systems and maintain these systems. It's going to depend on requirements that the IT people from the hospital impose on your system. And it also has a factor of risk tolerance. And what I mean by that, in just one example, I can send pictures from my smartphone, and I can send that to an email at the hospital. So I could take a snapshot in the back of the ambulance. It seems easy and pretty intriguing, and it may be a good way to start. But if you think about it a little deeper, you could also visualize that those images could end up on YouTube or on the 6 o'clock news. I don't think that's a risk that you could tolerate. So talking more about what's needed and what equipment is, this is a pretty straightforward example that it's pretty commonplace out there, moving just a simple 12-lead ECG from the field to the hospital. And you don't need much equipment. You could do it with a phone. You can do it with a radio. On the hospital side, you can receive it on a workstation or a PC with some receiving software. Pretty straightforward, doesn't require a lot of bandwidth. And then more of an intermediate example. Let's say we want to send some still images, either for a burn or a trauma application, or we want to capture a video clip and send that. And note in this case we're not talking a real time, so we're not going to stream the video clip, but I could capture one and send it. So, and that is one of the techniques for cellular. I may not have great cellular communications, but I can use some of these techniques as a workaround on how to do this. So in the ambulance, we said storing forward, not real time. It has many merits, many applications. So I could use some off-the-shelf components. Some of this functionality may be workable, and the chances are, though, for user ease, security, and effectiveness, you're probably going to need some specialized EMS telemedicine equipment, either hardware or software or both, to make it really usable. But it's a good place to start. And then if we want to go to kind of the holy grail of it and really have the ability for telepresence, where we want to do live streaming video data and information, in the ambulance we're probably going to want a ceiling-mounted PTZ or pan-tilt zoom camera, because the physician at the remote end is probably going to want to be able to control that camera and zoom in on the patient where he wants to and not disrupt the medic from their patient care. We're going to need a pretty good broadband connection to do this. 3G, possibly, with some limitations. 4G, more than likely. But we're probably going to need some specialized hardware and software to make this smooth and make it manageable. And the same thing on the hospital side as well. The focus here, and to make this all successful, is that the equipment needs to add to the patient care, not detract from the patient care. So ease of use and the security aspects and those components of it are as important as anything. And we think cameras when we think video, when we think telepresence and telemedicine, but there's other image sources as well. We already talked about an internal camera. Maybe there's more than one. Maybe there's an external camera. I know in the city of Tucson they experimented with an outside remote control pan-tilt zoom camera where they could see an accident scene, perhaps look at a mechanism of injury, or their Department of Transportation was able to look in and they could see an accident scene for traffic, or maybe it's a good application for disaster use. It also could be in the form of a handheld camera. Maybe there's an area on the patient that you want to zoom in with some other handheld device. We see laryngoscopes with video capabilities now. There's a few of those out there. In fact, in Baton Rouge and in Tucson, both have been tested across the network and to show that imagery could be sent to the far end, either for documentation that the tube's put in the right place or for training purposes. So there's additional capabilities here. On the monitor side, when we did Eagles back in 2005, we were able to capture streaming data out of the monitor, but that was just for demonstration purposes. Today, other than 12-lead, most of the monitors don't actually output streaming data. And this is probably something that you're going to want to start asking your manufacturers for now that these capabilities are coming. Portable ultrasound's another one. There's actually a study that's going to be beginning out of Washington, D.C. with EMS there, looking at the use of portable ultrasound potentially, I think, for trauma injuries and such like that. I don't know what their plans are for transmission of any video imagery, but we're beginning some discussions there as well. And what else might the future bring? Well, this is kind of the inside joke, but it's not necessarily. Portable CT scan or an MRI, are they in the future? Are they possible? Who knows? All right, so we've talked about some applications. We've talked about some of the technologies. Now, if we want to put a program together, what are some of the essential steps for doing that? So let's talk about some of those potential steps here. These are also in the article, but I'm just going to go over some of the highlights for that. So buy-ins and stakeholders. Well, certainly, the physician buy-in is going to be a must. The physicians are typically the ones that have the clout to pull things together. Obviously, you're going to want your medical directors and also any specialist physicians that would help pull the project together. EMS buy-in, that's another obvious. These are the users that can make or break the system. So you're going to want to get their buy-in, address the issue of Big Brother and the issue of cameras looking over the shoulder, address their concerns, make them stakeholders, and get them to understand the role that they play and that the system's there for them to enhance them, not detract from their day-to-day patient care. And on the hospital, of course, we need the hospital buy-in, or it might be a group of hospitals or a region. And like EMS, they got to understand the role that they play, what the goal is, and what the benefits are to them. And then on the organizational side, it's a bit more complicated. In fact, it may be the organization that pays for the system, but they may not be the one that directly benefits from cost savings. So there's a lot of complexities there, and certainly you're going to need all these stakeholders to buy in if you want to have a successful project. And then another step, defining your goals and defining some objectives right up front is important. There's medical aspects, organizational aspects, technical aspects. You need to clearly define the expectations and make sure that they are understood. For the medical side, that's where the applications are going to come from. And the applications, as we mentioned earlier, defines what the equipment needs are. So you can see how these things all really tie together. There's a lot of synergy there. From the organizational side, these items are going to help set the financing. Is ED overcrowding an issue? Is that one going to affect what the buy-in there and what the needs are in the financial side? On the technical side, that's going to define the performance and the reliability. And the last comment there where I mentioned metrics, design in the metrics. What are the tests? What are the measurements that you want to capture? Know those right up front, so not when you're at the end and say it all seems to work, but what are we getting out of this? Identify up front what you want to get out of this if possible. And then more specific on funding and finances, identify the savings. And who are the beneficiaries of this? You're going to want to identify them early because they're going to be large stakeholders. Secure the funding and leverage that, and you want to make sure you have funding for your ongoing operation and maintenance. Ultimately, that was one of the downfalls in the Tucson system, not by anybody's fault. It just happened to be that after pilots were completed and the system's up and going, we hit the economic downturn of 2008, which cut into their funding for ongoing and maintenance and became an issue within that system. So plan for maintaining the system and ongoing right up front. Don't run out of money on it if you can. Easier said than done, certainly. And then leverage your allied funding sources. These may not be obvious. I'll jump back to the Tucson example as well. Their funding came from Department of Transportation, and doesn't make immediate sense, but they had an allied mission, and that was for a wireless network that could be used for both transportation, traffic signaling, and for the medical aspects of it. So that all tied together. Disaster is another one. That's another ally where there's disaster components to telemedicine. You may be able to capture some funding by teaming up the two. So just some ideas there. And then when we get to install and training, well, this is, you would think on the downhill side of things, but this is where your coordination and your planning really comes into play. You're going to have a lot of coordination between agencies, and you have this already more than likely, but it's going to be at a deeper level, coordinating between EMS, between the hospital, between IT, between a regional council. And you have a diverse set of user groups with each with different goals and different missions and different expectations. You're going to have to spend a lot of time. It is time-consuming driving some of these issues through, so plan on that as well. And then we get into system testing, maintenance. Depending on how your system's set up, certainly you need to know that it works when you go to use it. Regular periodic testing is important. And you also want to have prompt maintenance and repairs. Will it work when you need it? Downtime or unreliable performance will kill the project. The medics won't tolerate that, and rightfully so. Regular testing, or better yet, from lessons learned in disaster training, we know that tools that we use only for disaster, we may not be as experienced. We may not know if they work come the day we need to use them. If you can tie your telemedicine equipment and usage into day-to-day activities, then you don't even have to do regular testing because you're already using it. People will be trained, they'll be comfortable with it, and you'll know that it works. So that's a good lesson learned there. And then, more on the bureaucracy side of things, policies and procedures. You need to have to create clear policies on when you're going to use it, who has access to information or use of the equipment, who is restricted from seeing data on it, are you going to record, are you going to store data, how is that going to be done? Those are certainly some key pieces to keep in mind as well. And lastly, in this list of topics, system phasing. Best not to try to do, especially if it's a large project, an all-encompassing, all-in-one. Determine your milestones. Where do you want to start? Is it starting with one ambulance, two ambulances, one hospital? Keep it simple. Learn from it as you go along. Phase the install, phase the implementation. This is new territory. Grow as you go. Don't do it all at once. And then as you move along, meet with your various groups, whether it be the EMS and the physician and all your stakeholders. Meet periodically. Learn what's working, learn what's not working, and continually loop that back and evolve it and get the program going in the right direction. All right, contrary to the steps that we just went through that you should do, we'll just point out a couple pitfalls and some other things that you should be aware of as you plan out a system. So some things to avoid. No clear application. That certainly seems obvious, but it may or may not be. If you don't have the application, you don't know what the equipment is. If you don't know what the equipment is, you don't know what the bandwidth is. That can certainly become problematic. No initial stakeholders. Build it and they will come. Well, maybe not. Ignoring the operation. Everybody but this one key player, Mr. So-and-so, is for it. He's not. Let's do it anyway. You're going to drag somebody kicking and screaming all the way through. They may fight you. They may ultimately cause a downfall. Get everybody on board. You may have somebody that's not a full believer, but keep it going. Get your stakeholders in later. Don't get somebody with their nose out of joint because they weren't involved early on. You want everybody working in the same direction. Let's build it ourselves. Well, unless you're doing just the very basics. And again, that may be a good way to start. But if you're going to do more than that, you may get in over your head. Making a workable system that adds benefit is much more than putting together some off-the-shelf components. So you're probably going to need some help with that. And too difficult to use. Well, medics are busy in the back of the ambulance. Nurses and physicians are busy at the hospital. If it's too difficult to use, it's going to detract from patient care and ultimately may work technically but will not work in a practical sense. Must be easy to use, must add to the patient care and not detract from the patient care. And again, that's where the specialization of the equipment and the hardware or software is really to make it effective. And just a couple other quick considerations. There's medical legal issues, benefits, both benefits and liabilities, and I'm sure you've considered some of these. Think about the oversight, and also consider the example of cameras in police cars. When that first came out, a lot of the cops did not want that, and you think by today's standards, it's a tool, it's an asset, and probably most that are used to working with them would not want a car that doesn't have the camera at this point in time. And then also be aware, when it comes to the regulatory side, the hospital IT people will certainly make you aware of HIPAA concerns. If it's going to connect to their network, and you may have multiple hospitals that need to be linked together, so now you have multiple IT departments that need to work together and may have different requirements. ITs and HIPAA compliance is certainly issues you should be aware of. FDA as well. FDA, Federal Food and Drug Administration, regulates all medical devices that move data for patient care. And including there are new rules that are in effect or are soon coming for data systems that move information, and that includes what we move from the field, and also for mobile devices. They're now looking at smartphones and iPads. So all these free apps that you see that downloaded may not be on the market in the near future. They are looking into regulating those as well, and rightfully so. We're taking care of patients here. So we'll give you a couple cases in point. I'm going to give you kind of two examples that we have certainly a lot of in-depth knowledge of. I'm just going to touch on some of the highlights of them. And these are really pioneering systems. There's been other systems, over the years that have come out of some universities and some studies, putting some equipment together and trialing some of these capabilities. Some of them actually have published some papers, and those are good things. We need more studies, and we need more information to come out of this. The two we'll talk about here, Tucson, their pilot actually began back in 2006. Their thrust was they got the equipment out to their fleet of paramedic ambulances, which went up to 19. I think it was 17 when it started, back to one hospital, University Medical Center. And I think they were all online back in 2007. They covered a pretty large area, around 220-plus square miles. And the system was geared on a Wi-Fi mesh network. I'll show you more in the next slide. And the second one we'll talk about for a minute is in Baton Rouge. And they did a pilot also with a single ambulance and single hospital. And they took a little bit opposite thrust than Tucson. They first went out and got equipment in all their hospitals parish-wide. And this gave them some different capabilities. Their hope is that they're going to get their funding next round sometime next year and then be able to push out additional capabilities to the ambulance. Their caption area in the parish, which to many of us as a county is over 470 square miles, so quite a big area. So back to the Tucson call, there is ER-Link. This is actually the first commercially available citywide deployment of a system of EMS Telemedicine. And they had a unique partnering arrangement between the fire department, which runs EMS there, between the University Medical Center, in particular the trauma department. Actually, the gentleman in the upper left picture is Dr. Latifi. He's a trauma surgeon and is a strong proponent and one of the founding fathers of that. And also, as I mentioned earlier, the city's Department of Transportation. They had interest in the wireless network for traffic signal control. And the team really came together, including the vendors, and worked and put quite a system together. Their application, because remember we're application-centric, trauma was the focus. And it was dedicated, it used a dedicated public safety mesh Wi-Fi network. And that was both a bonus and ultimately a detriment to the system. It was unique. It was high speed, especially back several years ago when this went in. We were getting data rates of, in many cases, a megabit. The issue there was it works where you have coverage, and where you don't have coverage, obviously, it's not going to work, and was ultimately a detriment to the system. But a lot of good information that came out of that. And then the second example system, just a little more detail on that, and that's Baton Rouge's BR MedConnect is the name of their system. And their function initially is more of a day-to-day EMS and telemedicine application. And strong on the ability of moving information and status information between hospitals in a secure, robust manner. The ability to conference between hospitals and their OEP as well for disaster. Because of Baton Rouge's geographic location and refineries, disaster is always something that's in the back of their mind, so they're kind of centric around that. So this system allowed them to really link up a lot of the agencies. And again, the next thrust will be to push it out to more ambulances in the field. On the communications network side of things, a little bit different in Tucson, where they had a mesh Wi-Fi, but just in a small region in their downtown section. So they were relying on cellular for the rest of their parish. Now, for the low-speed data and the non-streaming stuff works just fine. But one of the abilities that they have, which is an important one, is the ability for the system to automatically roam from communications network to communications network. So, for example, if they're in a downtown, it's going to be on the mesh Wi-Fi where they got pretty good bandwidth, and they get out of range, instead of dropping the call, losing a signal, it automatically would roam over and handle the 3G cellular connection. And hopefully 4G is going to open up some capabilities for them as well. Okay, getting down to some of the conclusion. I'm going to talk about a few more points here. The next couple slides, too busy to talk about in this webcast. I threw the slides in here anyway, and forgive me if the text is too small for you to read. But I figured for those of you that have the interest, you can go online and grab the webinar after it's available. And some of these points may be of interest to you if you're interested in putting a system together. Information is also in the articles. I think this slide actually references some sections in the articles to kind of act as a cookbook for you. A couple points I will make out of this. Again, re-emphasizing, EMS telemedicine is not standard telemedicine on wheels. You're not going to take equipment that's meant for in-hospital and bring it out to the field. And obvious, but perhaps not so obvious, expect the unexpected. A lot can happen, a lot can go wrong. Plan on that. If you don't do your homework and do things right, then you, like this gentleman in the corner here, you kind of get bit on the backside. Another busy slide again for use afterwards. The relationship between a vendor for EMS telemedicine equipment must be more than a purchase and sale. At this point, there's a lot that's being learned about telemedicine, a lot that's still evolving, so you kind of need a partnership. And this slide actually points out some of the points that you may want to consider so that you work together towards a successful project. So, what's it all mean? Where's it all going? You could kind of say that the use of telemedicine and EMS is determined by, we're simplifying it down to 4 factors. It's more involved. But can it be done? Well, that's a technology issue. And I think the answer to that certainly today is yes. Maybe not everywhere, depending on your geography in rural and urban. But if you don't have it, you will have it soon on the wireless side. So that technology has converged. So, I would say yes, can it be done? Is it needed? And that depends on your applications. Do you have applications where this will help, whether it be stroke or recorder refusals or burns or trauma, or whatever it is that makes sense for your appropriate community. What's it going to cost and who's going to pay for it? The financial aspects of it. Well, certainly that's where you're going to want to identify your stakeholders that have a financial stake. Is it ER? Is it keeping unnecessary admits in the hospital? Identifying that is going to help get this off the ground. And what's it going to mean to practice of EMS? The professional considerations, the stature of EMS of the medic. It's not intended to take away from their value or their care. It's intended to enhance it and to make it better. And on all of these, the pendulum's going to swing. There is no necessarily right or wrong answer. It'll swing, and we'll learn what works and what doesn't work. It'll swing, and we may find that applications or configurations work in one area and not necessarily in another area, so there may not be any right or wrong answer. What we're going to need is information to come out of those that get involved. So what's needed now? Well, to get going, we need people like yourselves that are on this call, leaders with energy and vision and ingenuity to get going. Take on the challenge and be out there on the cutting edge. And as you do that, hopefully gathering data. We need objective studies. This field needs objective studies. There's a few out there, but it certainly needs more to determine what works. Again, those early adopters are going to do it from gut and shoot from the hip and get out there and find out what works. And those more mainstream will get involved once the data comes and learning from the works of others. And taking a cue from what Dr. Fowler said at the beginning, this is the greatest era in the history of EMS, and he is, as well as we at Journal Devices, are looking forward to EMS cross into this new frontier. Here we go. And we're up to questions and answers, I guess.
Okay, great. Thanks, Kurt. You certainly have shared a lot of important information. It's a very exciting topic to be discussing. We've had several questions from our audience, so we'll start off with a question from Maria Van Buskirk, and she asks, Kurt, can you give us any examples of specialized EMS telemedicine equipment?
There are some out there. We did not want to make this into a sales presentation, but certainly we have our eBridge equipment. That is one example, and that was actually used in the ERLink projects and the BR MedConnect projects. That is an example. There are some lower-end pieces that you could use, depending, again, all ties back to what your application is, what you want to do with it, and what your available communications are. So we really need a little bit more information to help guide you into what equipment would be appropriate for that. You can try and do some Google searches. There are a lot, I'll caution you, there are a lot of telemedicine companies out there. I visited the ATA conference this past year, and more on the interfacility side, there are a lot of companies that offer equipment. Some are looking to push out into the EMS environment. I would just caution you again, what may work for interfacility or inter-hospital use may not work for EMS in the field.
Okay, along those lines of equipment, Lawrence Hatfield asks, do you have an average cost for the unit and receiving facility for just the component parts? Again,
I can only give generic answers without knowing what the application is, what communications network we're talking about. It could be as simple, Lawrence, as are you using Toughbooks in the field already and you have a PC out there? Could we give you some information on how to use an IP camera or how to use a webcam and perhaps get some information back? Could we use our smartphones for a low-end system all the way up to a full in-ambulance system or full telepresence system? Just to throw out some numbers without getting too crazy. It could be on the range of $7,000, $10,000, $15,000 per ambulance, and put that in perspective with what we spend on monitor defibs these days. So it's really per ambulance may not necessarily be a lot of money to do the full end if your applications make sense to do that, and if you have the wireless communications to do that. And then in the hospital side, again, depending on what's needed, what they have, can it be built upon what they have already? Do we have to start from scratch? So again, sorry if the answers are a little bit generic. We would just need more information. And if you wanted to reach out to us, afterwards, it's part of our Go-To Guys program. We can help you with some of these questions.
Well, along those lines, Kurt, if agencies already have Toughbooks in their ambulances, will they need another computer to do the telemedicine?
Again, it goes back to what the application is. If we're just looking to do snapshots, perhaps for burn or just snapshots to show a mechanism of injury for trauma, the Toughbook as a computer is probably all the platform that they need. They may want some specialized software on that. Now, you could take a Toughbook and you could take a digital camera and plug it in and attach a photo and email that off. And that may be a basic, easy way to start playing with these concepts. But how easy is it to use? Are we taking away from the patient care with a medic busy working a camera and plugging something in? So on one hand, it's inexpensive to get into the game and do it that way. On the other hand, you may want a special piece of software to run on that Toughbook that makes it easier to use, so that you just click a couple buttons and send the information out in a secure, robust manner. That's kind of the difference.
Okay. Robert Sims from Lifeguard Transportation asks, what medical devices can interface with video, for example, stethoscopes or otoscopes, so the doctor not only sees the patient via video but can also hear or visualize via the instruments?
Good question. And if you think back to that one slide, we did put up some of these instruments. There is a variety out there, and there's more that are available, for more traditional interfacility telemedicine. We mentioned video laryngoscopes. That's certainly one. There are electronic stethoscopes. I have not worked with them personally, but I know that they do exist. So those may be of interest as well. On the monitor side, it's kind of interesting and frustrating at the same time. Back in 2005, we did that demonstration project at the Gathering Eagles, and we demonstrated the possibility of live streaming data from the monitor, so that the physician at the far end could actually see what the medic sees, in a near real-time fashion. Today's EMS monitors don't have that capability. We can certainly output a 12 lead and send that information, and there's certainly a lot of good information on the display, but they're just not geared for outputting it for telemedicine applications. So I would urge you to reach out to your monitor vendors, get them to see what's possible, get it on the wish list of features that you would be interested in. And I mentioned kind of at the high end of things, is there a portable CAT scan machine? I actually saw one at ATA. It was probably bigger than what's going to fit in the back of an ambulance today, but it's heading in that direction. Could that be used for a stroke application, things like that? Obviously, with a short transport time, that's not going to make sense, but that may make sense when we're talking about community health, community paramedicine, things of those natures.
Good advice. Diana Robinson from Fairfax County Ambulance asks if you can address rural use a little bit. Are most of these devices going to need full reception to work? Okay,
and that's a good question too. And this is part of the dilemma between rural and urban. It's kind of counterintuitive. In the rural setting is probably where some more of the need is, and that there's probably not the same call volume as compared to an urban setting. The medics don't get as many calls per day. That's a fact. The distance that they have to travel to get to an appropriate care facility is probably much greater in both time and distance. At the same time, because they're in a rural environment, they don't have necessarily the high-speed bandwidth and the high-speed wireless connection that they would need to add in some of these additional capabilities. So that is a dilemma. Some of that's changing. There are initiatives out there in some states using federal funds to bring higher speed wireless into some of those more rural areas, so that the need doesn't necessarily follow what is possible.
Joe Padula asks, in your experience, how do paramedics feel about this technology? What kind of feedback are you getting from folks in the field?
Another good question. That is a variable. Depends who you ask. I would say a lot of it depends on the age of the medic as well. The younger guys, as you would expect, tend to be more technology accepting. Those of us that were on the ambulance years ago, and it's the way we've always done it, and it's always worked fine, may or may not be as accepting. But usually with a sit-down and with some discussion, showing what the pros and cons and the benefits, usually even those that are skeptic will usually come along and buy in. And if you do it right, you'll engage them, and they will become an advocate of the system as well. If you're using it for inappropriate reasons, just for the fact the neighbor or the hospital down the street's doing telemedicine, so we want it too, and it doesn't make sense, nobody's going to accept it, and they're probably right in their thinking. So depends how you approach it. Those that are more technology accepting are going to jump on this. We're seeing the same thing on the doc side. It's not just a medic issue. Docs have the same issues. How technologically advanced are they? The game changer here is not so much this equipment, but again, it's what we wear on our belts or what we have in our pocket. In the name of these smartphones, the public is looking at this. Well, I can do this with my phone. I can send pictures. Why can't you do this on the ambulance? The public's going to be expecting some of these technologies to come down the line.
That's a very interesting angle. And certainly another way that EMS can justify what it's doing in the field to its communities. I'm afraid we are out of time. We did have some other questions. We will post those questions and answers to those on our website within a couple of days. Again, I'd really like to thank Kurt Bashford and General Devices for sponsoring today's presentation. Within 24 hours, this program will be made available for viewing online in our multimedia center at emsworld.com and available in our archives for 1 year. Feel free to use the webinar as part of your ongoing training efforts, and you can view as many times as you like and with as many participants as you wish. If you have any additional questions for Kurt and General Devices, please use the contact information that you can find on the archives. So thanks again, and we look forward to you joining us again soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy.